Okay,
Hey, Eva, how are you?
good. How are you, Sue?
I'm well, thank you. First of all, thank you for joining us.
It's my pleasure. I'm really excited to talk with you today.
Yeah, well, we have a ton of good stuff to cover. Before we get into that, though, can you give us a little bit of background information about yourself, including, where you're from, and of course, how you got started with food photography? What made you interested in food photography? And maybe just a little bit about, because I know, it didn't happen overnight that you
Yeah.
became a food photographer. So go ahead.
Yeah.
Take it away.
So I'm from Portland, Oregon originally, and my parents had a Greek deli in Southeast Portland for decades. So I grew up helping there. So food was always something that I loved, that was a part of my family and just kind of how I was raised. So always loved cooking. And then in high school, I learned photography because I was really lucky in my public high school had a dark room. So I got really into photography then. And then I went to school for film production. So I got my bachelor's in video and like film and television down in Los Angeles. And so I lived down there for a while and was working in the entertainment industry, which was a lot of like I was more on the production side, so it wasn't as creative as you would think. It was really like admin heavy, like budgets and schedules, more like the management side of that, all that stuff.
Okay.
So that was what I was doing during the day. And then on the weekends, I was working on my food blog. So I graduated in 2009, which is at the height of the recession. So I was unemployed for like 6 months after college, and that's when I started my food blog. So I had all this time on my hands and I was cooking a lot anyway for all my friends. So I was like, well, everyone's asking me for my recipes. So I'll just put them on the internet so I can just send them a link instead of writing it down. So that's how it started. It was just for fun. But as I got more into it, especially like my photography improving, I started to get like offers to do shoots for clients and then eventually offers for like sponsored posts on my blog and on Instagram. And that was all taking off too, because that was around the time Instagram started. Yeah. So then I just ended up going so well that I signed my first cookbook deal, which was awesome.
Yeah.
And that's how I was able to transition from working in the entertainment industry to just like saying goodbye to that, because it was actually really sorry, hold on. Jeremy, can you do that later?
Yeah, sorry.
It's okay. It's really loud. There's like no doors that close in this part of the house, unfortunately.
That's so funny because I just told my husband, who was in the basement, to, when he left, be as quiet as a church mouse and go out the side door. So just as that was happening, there was noise happening on your end. So it's great.
Great. All right, cool. Yeah, so where were we? So then I was able to quit my job and like my day job and just do food photography and focus on my blog, and write cookbooks and stuff full time, which has been so nice.
Yes. Now I just realized I didn't give you a proper introduction. So you've already gone through a couple things that you do. You are a cookbook author. You've written a cookbook, a beautiful cookbook.
Thank you.
Yes. And with recipes that work. And you're also a cookbook photographer. We're going to get to that a little bit later, but you just got finished. I think it was like a 3-year-long process.
Yeah.
Photographing an amazing cookbook for a chef here in Portland. You're an educator, so you have classes that you offer. I think a couple classes, creative business school, and then like a visual branding and food and photography course.
Yeah.
And pre-COVID, you were like leading workshops all around the world, which is really cool. So anyway, I forgot to lead you in like that, but
it's fine.
If you don't mind, I'm going to share my screen with you because I would like to take a look. Can you see my screen?
Not yet.
Oh, here we go. Okay.
Okay, I see it.
So I want to come over here and move this bar down. And let's Oh, it doesn't really want to cooperate with me. Let's move you. Okay. So let's look at your Instagram feed first. Let's just feast our eyes on this. This is incredible, incredible stuff. You're kind of famous for, in my eyes, see this beautiful, I'm not sure if this is a giant cinnamon roll cake here, like a double decker one, but this lovely S swirl that we see is something I've seen you do over and over again in photographs. And it's so elegant and so beautiful.
Thank you.
You know, your work really, I always know when a photograph is yours, almost always, because, well, a couple reasons. You convey such a sense of like abundance. I mean, there's a lot going on in your images, but they're not busy. And the feel is very rustic, like you're using natural linens, a lot of times like hand woven baskets, handmade ceramics, natural wood, things like that. But the food itself is just immaculate. You know, there's no like messiness. So anyway, this is gorgeous.
Yeah,
now
it's
hop over.
It is like interesting how the food is so like, I'm very detailed with the plating of dishes, but I try to make the surrounding area feel more like natural and welcoming and not so like perfect, if that makes sense.
Yeah, well, I think that's a really great combination. I do. It works well. Now we're on your blog.
Yeah.
And this is Adventures in Cooking. You have a couple different categories here. You have recipes, which are organized by, well, you can just do a search, but they're also like seasonal. And then we'll talk about this a little later, your homestead that you're working on, photography, your courses are up here at the top. Work with me. Also, here's some more recipes, the most recent recipes, a nice little hello. And then we're also going to get to this, which is presets, one of my favorite things to play around with. And then you have these nice freebies that you can just like browse around here and learn things for free, like, you know, Pinterest, your how to conquer the Instagram algorithm, everybody wants to know. And here is your gorgeous cookbook. So there you have it. And then lastly, I also want to go over to this cookbook. This is the cookbook that you just photographed, right?
Yes. I'm so excited about this.
Yes. So from these images we just looked at, we can understand why someone would want to hire you to photograph their cookbook. And I think I recognize, is he in your kitchen there?
Yeah, he is.
Yeah, I knew it. I knew it. And see, again, I can tell that this is your image, the hue of the green and the depth of field, it's gorgeous. Anyway.
I'm so excited for that.
Okay, so back to the two of us. Let's talk a little bit about first, well, can I ask you about when you were getting started with your food blog and sort of becoming more successful, weren't you doing some secret suppers, like a little supper club?
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about that.
So those we were doing, they were basically pop-up dinners where in different really beautiful outdoor areas in Oregon, we would just bring in like everything, like the table, the flatware, and try to make it like really pretty, like highly styled table that was themed for the location. So trying to tie in the natural environment to kind of what the table looked like. And then we worked with my friends Mona and Jarrett of Ternant, and they specialize in wood fire cooking. And so they were doing all the food preparation at the time that I was involved with it.
Right. This is important to mention. They're not just driving up with their little truck of like catered trays. They're cooking on live fire.
Yeah, which is like a whole crazy skill set to have. And Mona and Jared are so bonkers talented at that. But that was so freeing with the suppers because we could host it anywhere. We didn't need a gas hookup. We didn't need a kitchen. If you could build a fire there, then that's all they needed. And so doing it with them opened up a whole world of possibilities of locations for the suppers. I'm not involved in them anymore. My friend Danielle runs them. But I was a part of them for several years and it was super fun.
Yeah, it sounds like an amazing experience and a great way to meet a lot of people too.
Yes, that was another thing that was so special is like I met so many people, and I'll still like get messages on Instagram, like replies to stories where I'll like start talking with someone who'll be like, oh, I don't know if you remember, but I was at like the Napa supper that you guys did. And I'll be like, oh yeah, like I remember you. It's really awesome.
Okay, since you just mentioned Napa, that sort of makes me think of the workshops that that your business has afforded you the opportunity to travel to
Yeah.
execute those workshops. I mean, I imagine the first time you set one of those up, you were probably super nervous. But, obviously they were successful. So tell me, where have you been that's been really cool to experience for the workshops?
There's been a lot of different locations. My favorite one, well, my all-time favorite one is definitely the one I host in Croatia, just like a really special little part of Croatia that's on the Italian border. So it has a lot of Venetian influence. And it just kind of looks like if Tuscany was untouched by tourists, like that's what this area is like. It's like so special. But I've also done them in like Barcelona, done it in Iceland.
Oh, wow.
That one was really fun. The landscape there is amazing.
Mhm.
I love the one I did in Taos, New Mexico. Kind of has that whole like, bright blue sky, turquoise like vibe with the like neon orange adobe buildings, just like so pretty. I know I've done them in Italy before with my friend Valentina, and also in Bordeaux. That was a really special one too. So it's just in London. It's been amazing, like being able to think about a place that I think would be really beautiful backdrop for the workshop, and then just being like, all right, well then we're gonna go there and we'll like make it happen. It's usually based around someone I know there, and also the food. Like, is the food there really good? Is there something cool that we can like do as a side excursion that's food related? So like in Bordeaux, we obviously went wine tasting, learned about the winemaking process. In Croatia, that area is famous for truffles. So we always go truffle foraging with like this family and their dogs, and that's really special too. And yeah, it's just been an awesome way to travel and see a bunch of different cultures and learn at the
Incredible.
same time. Yeah.
What about Greece? Because I know do you still have relatives that are alive in Greece?
I have a lot of family. Greece, a lot of family. Yeah. I've always wanted to do one in Greece. Um, the only issue is the island that my dad is from, that all my family's on, doesn't really have the type of accommodations that I would like for when I host my workshops. There's some things that I've learned that I'm like very inflexible about. And one of the things is that I want all the attendees and myself to be in the same large house, because it just creates so much more of a like community bonding experience than it does if you're in a hotel and people are like separated into their like suites or whatever.
Mhm.
Um, and it also has to be like, so it needs to be a house that has like at least 8 bedrooms. So that's a pretty rare. And then it also has to be like a luxury level accommodation, because, the workshops aren't cheap. And so I want people to feel like really well taken care of
Right.
and in a really beautiful space. So that really narrows down where I can
Right.
host it too.
Well,
Yeah.
I have an idea, and it wouldn't surprise me if you came up with this on your own, but why don't you build something yourself there?
That would be amazing. That is definitely something that I have been thinking about, like in the back of my mind, because
Yeah.
yeah, there's some beautiful land that's in the family out there that would
Mhm.
be a really beautiful place to build a big house and do that sort
Very,
of thing.
very cool. Well, you're
Yeah.
young, so you have time. Um, okay, let's talk a little bit about on your website. We saw where you offer classes and you've got like some other sections and stuff. I do want to mention briefly, even though now it's in the beginning of March and this video will not be seen until April and then afterwards, you're offering tomorrow a masterclass on like how to harness the power of natural light and other things. You're going to cover other things, but that's the focus. You work with natural light exclusively. So I do want to mention that because I've taken it twice, and it's not every photographer. A lot of photographers work with artificial light, and many students think that you have to have all this fancy equipment and stuff. And this is a masterclass that you offer a couple times a year. And I found it really invaluable. I mean, you've got you're learning how, well, you tell us what you're going to teach, because I think you're learning how light behaves and how to shape it. And as long as you know what time to shoot and like how to make the light work, you can, that it's free. So go ahead, talk more.
That's like something that I feel like people get really feel held back by in photography, that I just want to help dispel through this masterclass, is that like you don't need to be spending like thousands of dollars on artificial lights, especially when you're first starting out shooting, because you know, one of the things I go through in the masterclass is my lighting kit, which is like $41 total, and it's like I've used it for years, like to shoot multiple cookbooks, and it totally works. Like you can create really gorgeous images without having to like spend so much money, especially when you're first starting out. It's better to save that for the camera and the lenses. But yeah, so I really like to focus on shaping natural light, because a lot of people think of light as static, but I like to think of it as a moving thing. And so through the tools that I teach in the class, like using negative fill or a reflector or partially blocking the light source, you can really shape it and like get it to go exactly where you want it to, like thinking of it almost like a river, you know, and you're just like trying to shape its flow and the current to fall right on the subject and look really flattering.
Neat. I mean, we do touch on some of those things, but I definitely want our students to like keep abreast of when you're offering that, because I think it's really, really valuable.
And it's a free class too. So
right. Yeah. Awesome. Okay. Can you take us through quickly the ways that you as a photographer and blogger are earning income right now? Because I know there are lots of different options out there, but what are you focusing on? Right? Was that a chicken?
Oh, that's my dog. He's a Chihuahua, so he's very small.
Okay.
Like there's a bird in the house.
Okay. Anyway.
So what I'm doing for income right now, the main thing is teaching. So I'm teaching photography online and how to run a creative business. I'm teaching online. Before the pandemic, I was teaching in person. Also before the pandemic, I would say that sponsored posts for Instagram and for my blog made up a large chunk of my income. Whereas after the pandemic, because so many companies have pulled back a lot on their marketing budgets, it's probably like less than half of what it was in like 2019. So I'm still doing it, but it's not like as reliable as it used to be. And then shooting for clients is the other thing that I do as well. So like Gregory Gorday's cookbook, that was my really big project that I've been working on. And I really don't take on that many freelance photography client projects a year, because I usually only take on really big ones. Like Gregory's is like, that was so encompassing. I didn't have time to do anything aside from like his project and keep up with my blog and Instagram and courses. So yeah, but now that his cookbook is over, I'll probably be doing more of that with different clients instead of fewer clients, but just one big project, if that makes sense.
Got it. Well, congratulations on completing that.
Thanks.
I'm looking forward to seeing it, having a look at it. I wonder, and this is something you partially answered, but I did wonder about it because 3 years, I don't know, I don't have any personal experience in shooting cookbooks, but it seems like a long time to me. And I thought, well, I wonder if she would just jump out and do it again tomorrow if you got an offer, the right offer. Like, how enjoyable was that process? Because I know that you're very selective too about the work you take. And oftentimes cookbook projects there can be a lot of cooks in the kitchen telling you how to do things. And I know that you probably like to retain some creative control, especially with the lighting and stuff like that. But you're interested in doing more cookbooks?
Yeah, but with the right person. Like that's so key. Gregory is so laid back and fun and kind and easy to work with. And he's also really good communicator too. So like I could tell right off the bat if he was like into something or not. And he was like really good at communicating if he didn't like something, or saying like, I really, really like this, which sounds like it should be simple, but it's really not. Like a lot of people struggle with communicating what they want visually, but Gregory was so good at that it made it so much more pleasurable to do, because it wasn't like like feeling anxious guessing every step of the way. He was like pretty clear about what he wanted. And he is so precise with his plating. So like I didn't do any plating or food styling or anything. Like he cooked everything, he plated it. I was just photographing it and kind of getting like choosing the surface and the plates. I would like choose a few plate options for that dish and then give them to him. And then he would choose like which of the 3 or 4 plates he liked the most. Or if he didn't like any, he'd be like, yeah, can you like give me another option? So it's really like when you're shooting a cookbook, especially for a chef, I think it might be even more different, but it's really about their vision. And so I want to work with him to understand what he wants. And then it's my job to actually bring that vision into something real that you can like look at. So it's a real collaboration.
It sounds like it was a really successful collaboration. So that's great to hear. Okay, how about, let's talk briefly about, you offer presets. One of the things that we're going over in this course, and again, we're learning how to take better pictures using our phone, because you know, phone cameras are great these days.
They're
you know,
so good.
It's a great
crazy
place to start out. Yeah.
Yeah.
And we're using Lightroom Mobile so we're learning how to shoot, and then composition and styling, and then how to edit, and then the business of food photography, which is where you come in. But in the editing section, Lightroom Mobile has, I mean, it must be 100 presets. And some people kind of like poo-poo presets, but I just happen to like playing around with them. For one reason is that it gives me just another perspective of how the image could look. And I can go into the settings and see like what a person has done. Like, oh, they really made the greens a little more blue than I normally do. And oh, they used a lot of contrast, and oh, they raised the shadows. And I'll give you a concrete example that I shared with you earlier. I had a shoot earlier in 2020, at the end of 2020, and we had pre-planned the whole thing. And then when we were going to shoot on these like light wood tables outdoors. So I was prepared with my like 80-foot, you know, diffuser. But when I got there, the chef and his wife, they were like, oh, guess what? We stained the table. And so it was like orange and orange color, and it was shiny because they put a finish on it. And I almost had a panic attack, and I was like, oh, great. You know, but inside I was thinking, oh dear. And then we did the shoot, got home, I started editing, and I could feel myself like after an hour just like start to choke up, you know, and I'm going to cry. This is horrible. So I thought, well, I'll just play around with some presets. And I popped a few presets in, and I can't remember exactly which one it was of yours, because you offer a lot of them and you offer them in bundles. So there's like a travel preset, there's like a dark and moody, a bright, a light and bright. And then within your travel, like you can go to Greece, to your grandma's garden, and you can go like to Croatia. And I mean, it's crazy. But anyway, I popped this one in, and I am not kidding you, everything just worked. Like I was like, oh, thank God, you know. So where did you come up with the idea to like sell your presets?
I think it was just something that I saw a lot of photographers doing online, but at that time there weren't really many food photographers doing it. It was mainly something portrait photographers were offering. So I was like, well, I'm a food photographer and I use them all the time. So I'm sure other food photographers would really like having these. So then I just popped them on my site and people really liked them. So that's another thing that I've used as like just a nice passive income source for years now. That's been great. And I use them every time I edit. Like there isn't a photo that I've edited in the past like 4 years that I haven't used one of my presets on. They're just, like you said, it's so nice to scroll over them and see all the different paths that you could go down with an image. Because sometimes when you're on set and you're shooting, you have like a vision of what you want in your eye. But then when you get in Lightroom and you kind of try to go with that vision, you're like, well, I don't know if I like this. And then scrolling through those shows you all the different looks that you can create, and it's just really
Absolutely.
liberating. Yeah.
Yeah, and I know that for myself, sometimes if I stay in Lightroom too long, my color, I almost go colorblind. It's so
Yes.
nice to just try what somebody else would do with it. So anyway, those are really fun. I'm glad you do them. Um, Tell us a little bit about your creative business school, because that's not just for photographers. I took that course and it really helped me get organized, like especially time blocking. And I know that with all that you do, you must be a very organized person. So just talk us through a little bit about like how that course, helps creatives be
Yeah.
more successful and productive.
Yeah. So the course is basically about helping you to have a business and run it in a way that's profitable, but also realistic and low stress. Because one thing that I see a lot with creatives is this feeling like you have to be doing a million things all the time, especially as a small business owner. You do have to do a lot of different types of tasks. You're doing admin, you're doing marketing, you're also being an artist and creating. So those are a lot of different parts of your brain that you're using all the time. And it can be really overwhelming and stressful if you can't stay on top of like managing all those different things that you have to do. So I put the course together to kind of give a nice guideline of how to approach each of those aspects of running your own creative business in a way that doesn't like kill your inspiration or keep you from being profitable, or just keep you from really being like uninspired and overwhelmed and stressed out all the time, because that's how I felt after my first cookbook was done. And I was like, I don't want anyone to feel like this. I feel terrible. So I put together this course to really give people structure in their business and just make it easy for you to stay on top of your tasks and manage your time better, just kind of nourish your creativity and be realistic about, how many things you can do at one time.
Mm-hmm. I
Yeah,
loved it. I loved it.
thanks.
Um, let's talk about, if you could take us through, I know every shoot is different for you, but let's just say you're shooting a recipe for your blog. What are the things that you think about that you're defining and sort of sketching out before you actually pick up your camera? I wonder, I assume by now that you sort of have compositional geometry and techniques in your head and you're not
Mhm.
sketching them out, but take us through like kind of from the idea of like maybe it's summer and you're thinking like I really want to do something with peaches, and what is the step-by-step process, and also including like how you're going to frame the image, you know what I mean?
Yeah. For me, it does really start with ingredients most of the time because I cook seasonally. So I'll think about what the ingredient is, and I tend to think about its color and its texture and how I can harness that most in a dish to like look really good. And also, of course, taste good, but usually with fresh produce, that's a given. Like it's gonna
Right.
taste good. So like for example, I have an apricot galette recipe on my blog. And with that, I really wanted to show off the color because apricots have this insane gold color. And also just the shape when you slice them is really pretty if it's like a repeating pattern. So I did a spiral of that. So it starts with color and starts with texture, in terms of what food I'm actually going to make. And that's the deciding factor for that. And so once I've decided on the actual dish I'm going to make, whether it's like a casserole or a tart or whatever, I then start thinking about the shooting surface. And that is also based around color. So I'm thinking like what color is going to complement this, or if it's a dish that I know is going to be really vibrant and super busy looking, then I'll probably pick a more neutral surface so that's not competing with the food. And then once I choose the surface, that the color of that and the color of the dish then informs all the props that I choose, which is also pretty much based around color, and texture as well.
Mhm.
And then I'll start thinking about the angles that I want. And also, I really like action shots. So I'll think like, what kind of action could I do for this kind of dish? Could I do any drizzling? Could I do any sprinkling? Yeah, and that's pretty much it. I don't ever, like you said, I don't draw anything. It's all just like up here, but I do love Google Calendar. So I think about the shoot beforehand, and then I'll just make notes on my Google Calendar on that day of any shots that I thought of in advance, of like make sure to get this like action shot of the drizzle, or like a close up top down on the tray. So that as I'm going through it, I have a reference point and can just make sure I get all the shots that I was thinking about.
Got it.
Yeah.
Great to know. Okay, I've seen you do some pretty, I don't know if intricate is the right word, but I don't ever see you really just making like buttermilk pancakes. It's always like buttermilk pancakes with, I mean, it's pretty cool what you do with your recipes. But is there a food that you've shot that you thought, like maybe a meringue or that pavlova, holy cow, with the drips going down, you know which one I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Are there any foods that just have destroyed you, like you're just thinking, I'm never going to photograph that again, or that you shy away from because either like, or you don't eat maybe meat, something like that? But what has been a challenge for you in terms of kinds of food to photograph?
Yeah. For me, something that was really hard, but then I practiced it to get better at it, is like any sort of lasagna. Because you can't really shoot it from the side because it's in the tin. You have to cut it to see the layers, which of course I'll get a shot of it cut. But as a top down shot, like a flat lay, it's pretty boring looking. It's not great.
Mhm.
So that was hard. I've gotten a lot better at it now because I always garnish the top now with like thinly sliced whatever's in there so it looks pretty, but that's really hard. And if there's anything that I like actively avoid, I'm trying to think of like what else, like ground meat that's cooked. Definitely avoid that because it just looks weird and lumpy. That's very hard to look nice. You
Right,
basically have to cover that with a garnish to
right,
make it look good.
right.
Yeah, those are like the main things I think that I'm like, I don't know about that. Like that's really hard. But everything else, like I've shot a lot of meat. I eat meat not a lot, but I do shoot it for the blog, and I'm pretty good at shooting meat now. But desserts are so easy to do. And the only thing that's hard is when you're baking and it doesn't cooperate. Because with baking and recipe developing, baking is so sensitive that when you're trying to create your own recipe, sometimes the custard just doesn't set. And you're like, God, like, how am I going to shoot this? It's all liquidy. Or like, there's all sorts of stuff that happens that makes it hard to take a good photo because the recipe is just not quite ironed out yet. Um, but I would say those are the things that I shy away from.
Right. I mean, I would say I found chocolate to be kind of challenging too, like getting it to that consistency where it's looks like it's melted a little, but you don't have a fingerprint in it from when you've touched it,
Yeah.
or and then that brings me to my next topic, which is because I thought of, well, Photoshop, are there any, I mean, you've got a lot on your plate, you're working on a homestead, which we'll talk about in a second, but are there any business goals that you have for this year coming up, or maybe personal projects you're working on? I mean, I know the homestead is like a big, so we could just stop there, but maybe a skill, like a photography skill that you want to learn. I mean, for me, I'm trying to learn Photoshop,
Oh,
um,
nice.
but I thought I'd ask you, see if you're working on anything.
I don't have, well, I actually did just take a course that was about, it was like a mini online course about writing a really good sales page because I struggle with writing copy, like marketing text, because it's just very overwhelming for me. And even though I do so much marketing as a part of my job, it's the thing I enjoy the least and that comes the least natural to me. So it takes up a lot of mental energy to do. So I was like, I'm going to take this course because it's something that I'm naturally not great at and don't enjoy. So I want to like learn from an expert. And so I did this little mini course. I can't remember. Do you want me to look up what it's called?
No, that's okay. I was just curious in general what you were working on and some of your
Yeah.
skills,
And
maybe.
so that was really helpful. And
Yeah.
then I'm a big fan of Amy Porterfield. She teaches like online marketing. So if she has a class later this year, I'll probably take another class from her. And then I'm knitting for fun, but that's not really work related, but
Yeah, that's right. I mean, and that dovetails nicely into my next question, which was like, I'm just interested in hearing a little bit more about, what you do when you're not working, because you're doing some interesting things. I mean, you're knitting, as you said, and then you just bought some property somewhat recently, so you're working on a homestead, and then what else? Oh, your seed collection. Can you tell us a
yeah.
little bit about your seed collection and the homestead?
Yeah, so I love gardening. So we have a great garden here in Portland, and I have thousands of seeds, which I keep in my refrigerator now because my dad taught me they'll last so much longer that way. So I put them all in like plastic bags, and they're just like in their own little shelf in the fridge. But I really am into heirloom varieties of fruits and vegetables because we've actually lost so many varieties since farming became more industrialized because they just mass plant the same very few varieties. So you lose out on all those delicious heirloom ones. And a lot of those have really great natural resistance to local pests and stuff anyway. So you don't even need pesticides and things. So anyway, I'm really into seeds and gardening, as you can probably tell. And I love knitting as well. That's like another hobby that I've gotten really into over the winter. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, what do you grow? You grow tomatoes. I know you grow berries, you grow
Mm-hmm.
herbs, you grow squash, because I've seen a ton
Yes.
of squash in the summer. Do you grow any lettuces or what else? Tell me what else you grow
Yeah.
in Portland. Like
Yeah.
you don't have like farmland.
No, yeah, this is just in our garden in front of our house. So I have kale also. Um, there's also some nettle. I have a little patch of nettle and some mugwort, some more like medicinal herbs, and then strawberries. And then we have a cherry tree and an apple tree and a pear tree that were already here when we bought the house, which is so awesome. And I have a fig tree and yeah, just lots of different berry shrubs. And I try growing peppers and eggplants, but they don't do super well because I do love a lot of plants, and so they get a little shaded out and they
Mhm.
love sun. So they'll be alive, but they don't produce much compared to the tomatoes. So
I see.
yeah.
I see. That's neat. Okay, well, back to photography. I think we'll, this is like we're winding down in terms of my questions. I wonder if you could sort of distill a few of your top tips on improving food photography for our students who are just starting out. And I imagine maybe just wanting to take photos of things they've cooked for their classes that they're
Hmm.
maybe going to serve for dinner or dessert or whatever. And they may just typically be putting it on the dining room table or maybe in the kitchen with like the horrible yellow overhead light.
Yeah.
What are some of the top tips you could give us in terms of improving our food photography, assuming we're working with a phone?
Yeah. So when you're working with the phone, the most important thing you want to think about is definitely the light. So try to shoot with just natural light. So whatever room you're in, turn off all the artificial lights that are on. And then the most flattering light for food is soft diffused light. So if it's like a really sunny day and you have direct light coming in through the window, and by that I mean when you look at the shadow that's cast, you have like a hard line between the shadow and the light. That's no good. We don't want that because it's really harsh and it makes the food look really bad. So what you really want to do is find a window that doesn't have direct harsh light, but does have a lot of light coming through. So like the window behind you is perfect because it's bright, even though it's sunny, that direct harsh sunlight isn't coming through the window. And then you just want to take your dish and just put it really close to the window because that's where you're going to get a nice shadow falling off of one side of frame two. And ideally, you want it to be in a room that's not like huge, like just covered with the windows, because then you'll lose shadow. It's better to just find like one nice window on a wall, put your dish in front of that, and then take the picture. So I would, one exercise I would say would be a really good idea is to take one dish and set it down in front of different windows in different rooms in your house and try to label it as you take the picture. so that, maybe like write on a piece of paper and put it underneath it in frame. And then you can compare how the light looks in your different rooms and see which one you like the best.
That's a great idea. Yeah, I like that idea. Okay, Eva. Well, thank you so much for joining us. It's been really,
Welcome.
really special to hear from you, especially for me, just because, you've been my teacher and I follow you so closely.
Thank
So
you,
I'm just
Sue.
very grateful that you're here to share with us. And we will keep abreast of what you're doing so we can learn from you in the future too.
Awesome. Well, it was my pleasure. This has been so fun, and I love the project that you guys are doing.
Yeah, it should be fun. Okay, Eva, well, have a great day.
You too.